I've been mulling over something. Let me first say it's illegal, federally illegal, to shoot down drones. But I will say at the same time, sometimes what's legal and not legal has to take a back seat. Um, they have found that these drones have been a big deal in Ukraine, and in the future now that is going to be the thing. And all these wars that get going, drones are going to dominate. And I know I read a report from an organization that deals with stuff that gets imported into this country. And since this drone thing has got to be so big and there's so many people do it as a hobby, there is a lot of products come into the country that are specifically designed to weaponize drones. So this could be a thing. As far as a terrorism tool, I think drones could be a big thing. Though in all likelihood, I mean, actually, if you have thoughts of shooting down a drone, the likelihood it's going to be owned by the government. Can you imagine, like in Waco or in Ruby Ridge, if they'd had drones at that time, the use that they made of them? Well, now anything that goes on, there's going to be drones there. And that's a little spooky, but also from the terrorism point of view. But like I said, they said there's a hell of a lot of stuff coming into this country that's in the public market that makes them really nervous. So, it's something to keep an eye on. And I was thinking, I want to do a little experiment on ways to take down drones. I thought at first I was thinking, if you remember, if you think back in the old days of wooden warships, sailing ships, they used to use a thing called chain shot that was like two cannonballs with a length of chain between them. And they'd use them for tearing down the rigging on an opposing ship. You start hammering them in there and it tears all that miles of rope that they used en masse. And if any people are in the way, they're cut in half. And I think that's the way to take a drone down, is with something that would tangle the propellers. The propellers are the weak point on the drone. I don't know a lot about drones. I don't even know anybody who has one. But from what I can see, I think that's the weak point. And the best way would be if you could entangle them some way. And if you ever hit some old bale twine, particularly plastic bale twine with a lawnmower, it puts a stop to things in a hurry. So I think if you had something that could entangle them propellers, that would bring it down fast without destroying it, but it would bring it down. Which made me think of that chain shot. This is double-aught buck. It comes out of the mold. It's in 3 pieces, and then you gotta take and cut them apart. There's a little tail between them. Now, I was thinking the best way to do this would be to make like lead beads. If you could get a hole in, and I think, you could use, another method would be split shot. If you used split shot and had like a 4-foot piece of monofilament fishing line in between them, you fly them out there, they're going to tangle something. That's by using 2 of them. But I would say one, dragging about 8 feet of monofilament line, would do the same thing. The only thing of the 2 working as, like I say, a chain ball, you could get, normally double-aught buck, you're getting 8 or 9 BBs in a shell. That's what fits in the wad nicely. Well, the monofilament line isn't going to take much space because there's plenty of room between. But if you take one of them out and run 4 pairs of balls with a monofilament line in between. The only downside, they could tangle. You know, that's why I want to experiment and see if they will fly true, or if the whole thing will get all snarled up, which would still work, but, you know, I want to see. That's where a single ball trailing a length of monofilament might be better. But that's where the experimentation comes in. But my thought about getting holes in them, like I say, they come out of the mold, 3 linked right together. Well, you could very easily use a small, you know, they're in there like that, a very small drill bit, and go right down. It was a flat bottom, would fit in the drill press, as long as you had your depth on the bit set so it wouldn't go all the way into the mold. I think that would work very well. I think you could make lead beads. They're in there good now. But I think that's a thought. I'm going to have to try that. But whether it's 2 paired or single ones trailing, we'll see which one patterns better. You know, they do make anti-drone shot, but it's crazy expensive and very weirdly designed, and I think you'd be better off than just with a load of double-aught buck. But like I said, it's illegal to shoot drones down, but in my theory, if there's a drone within the range of my shotgun, it's screwed out that close. And I've got that Mossberg, well, that Maverick 88 short-barreled security gun, no choke, you know, a straight cylinder. I think that would work excellent for that. And that spreads out pretty good at about 50 yards. So I have to try that. Shoot a piece of cardboard and see what she looks like. It's a thought, because I think this is going to be a problem. I mean, you see where they're, you know, these drones are capable of incredible speeds even. They can run a car down. You know, it's a thing that I think we're going to have a problem with. But it's like the ultimate terrorist tool. You know, and yeah, I mean, they can jam some of them, but they keep changing. And then now a lot of them are running that fiber optic stuff, which seems crazy to me. That is one downside to the using the nylon fish line, you know, that monofilament. That stuff is hell on birds. If it's laying, they get tangled up in that bad. That's where you always see where somebody's fishing and then they unspool some line and leave it laying. And, you know, that's just a trap for ducks and stuff. So that is a big no-no. The good thing is that monofilament does break down in the sunlight, and it can be doing a lot of it. But I thought, I'll load up a half dozen of them, play around with them a little, and if they work out, keep them on hand, just in case. Like I say, the truth, you know, I don't see drones flying around. Well, the military runs, but they're high up. But the possibility of somebody pissing around with a hobbyist drone that can be weaponized, that's something you got to keep an eye on. So it'd be good, you know, to have something loaded up for that kind of situation. I mean, plus, I mean, just when you're throwing that big a chunk of lead out there, that should take down a drone by itself. But I think the idea of entangling the propellers, that's where the one I did see, like an ad for anti-drone, and it was weird. It was like they were segmented, And then when they came out, they were supposed to spread out and throw like a net. Well, I saw somebody trying them and they weren't working. I mean, they were just very erratic and very expensive. And like I say, you'd have been better off just with playing shot. But I think dragging a length of monofilament, I think that would be deadly to a drone. I was going to try to load up, like I say, 9 will fit in there. You could get 3 groups of, and see if they stay together, like a dumbbell sort of an arrangement. See if they fly. But I think I could drill, like I say, you'd have to get the right size drill bit so it wouldn't interfere with those little passages between. You don't want to make them any bigger than they are. And you would have to set the depth so it would just barely go through that bottom one. Then you wouldn't have to separate them, they'd just fall apart. And string them out of string and whack them once with a hammer, and they would stay. It's an idea. I'll have to play around with this. I think it's probably frowned on. But I think the potential for the drones to be abused is very great. And like I say, they're here. They're here now. And the fact that, because this outfit that did this kind of survey to see what was available to weaponize these things, they were shocked at what all you can buy on the open market to make your drone a weapon. Something to think about, something to experiment with. I'll get back to you sometime. Test them out and see what happens. Oh, that'll probably be, they probably won't like that. YouTube probably won't. They don't like to fiddle around with things like that.